Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Steve Tracy. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Services here at JL Audio. I'm located down in Southern Florida, just a few miles north of our main headquarters in Miramar. Today with me I have Rob Haynes over in Southern California. Say hello, Rob.
Hello, Rob.
Perfect. Way to start it off. I also have Kevin Ferry up in the Pittsburgh area in Pennsylvania. Say hello, Kevin.
Hello, everybody.
Fantastic. So Kevin's going to be presenting today, and just a quick reminder, these sessions are designed specifically for web viewing, so we're very mindful of your time and of course your attention span as well. So they're all intended to last between 30 and 45 minutes, give or take, and everything about the session has been done to get as much information in on a particular topic as we can. Since we're only doing WebEx today, over on the right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to see the chat window. If you don't see it, if you hover your cursor over the main window, you'll be able to see a couple of bubbles and icons. One of those looks like a little chat icon. Click that, the chat will open up on the side. Rob and I will be keeping an eye out on the chat window itself while Kevin does our presentation. So Kevin is going to not be able to see any of that until after he's done presenting. So if you want to talk bad about it, you could do that up until the very end. And Rob and I will just keep an eye out and anything that you need to get to Kevin, just let us know and we'll take care of that for you.
This session is going to be an overview for the VXi products. We kind of went through our introduction a little bit there, but we're going to really get in and dig into why DSP matters. We're going to go over the concept of VXi and kind of how it came about. We're going to go over the hardware of the products and really kind of dig in about some of the benefits of having that integrated DSP into your system. So why does DSP matter? You guys are probably seeing more and more amplifiers on the market these days that have built-in DSP. So why are you guys seeing that? And we're going to go through and kind of give you some benefits to each. So both the customers and to dealers. We're going to actually start off with the customers here. You're going to see better performance and better reliability. And what we have, or what we mean by that, is on the reliability aspect, we have nice indicators for the inputs and the outputs, so you can see exactly what the amplifier is doing and know if you're getting into any type of clipping situation, like I said, whether that's on the input side or the output side. And that really allows you to maximize the performance of the amplifier without getting into the bad stuff that can happen with it. So you're really maximizing the performance with it on that side of things. And the VXi amplifiers have a ton of flexibility, whether you're talking about the DSP portion of it or channel configurations with the VXi. They really are allowed to set up and be set up and installed in most any application. We have amplifiers from 8 channels all the way down to 2-channel and mono applications. So a lot of flexibility on those amplifiers. Now, when we take a look at the dealer side of things, it really gives a repeatable and consistent sounding results, and that's very important. A lot of times the first or the next customer coming in the door is somebody that's heard their buddy's system and they're like, man, I really heard Steve's system. It sounded great. And I really want that, except for I want it louder. Well, how do you get those consistent results without having a DSP that you can go in there and really fine tune and have that ability? So it really helps out giving that consistent, repeatable results. And like I said, on the flip side, you can use those clipping indicators also on the dealer side to get those consistent results, also maximizing your output of your amplifier. And you can give the customer some things that they may not even know that they wanted. You know, there's things on the amplifier like presets where you can set up different listening environments and all of that stuff, which we'll get into down the road. But think about this. You can exceed the customer's expectations by giving them some of these options, and that's always a good thing to do. A lot of vehicles these days also come with a factory DSP type system in them. Like I had a 2017 F350, and if I just replaced the system with some amplifiers without DSP, I would lose a lot of the staging and a lot of the quality of the output into that system. Yes, I could definitely get it louder, but without DSP, I would lose some of the benefits of that system that was in there, and it may not meet the expectations of the customer by not using a DSP when replacing those types of systems. So when we talk about the concept of the amplifier, we really did design it for high-end mobile audio. When you take a look at this project, it really had to not only have a high-end look, but it really had to have the performance to match with it. And the VXi definitely had to have that incredible set of DSP features integrated into it, and obviously be one of the best sounding amplifiers that we have when we take a look at that with all of the features and the price point of this piece. Now, we also wanted to make sure that it had a full family of designs, so that way, whether you needed 6 channels, 8 channels, just depending on your system, we were able to accommodate with one of these amplifiers. And all of that had to be wrapped up in a nice little package that was really easy to install and really easy to set up. So not an easy task by any means. So this slide here is kind of a personal thing to me. I mean, there's a lot of cool things with VXi when you take a look at some of the features and benefits of the VXi. But to me personally, I actually came in right as this project was really unfolding and coming to market, or getting ready to come to market. So when I stepped in and I kind of took a look at some of the different things that happened and went on with the development of VXi, this was some cool things for me to talk about. It is amongst one of the most complicated projects that JL has ever undertaken. And if you think about it, it's not just an amplifier, it's not just a DSP piece on there, it's just not software that's available for it. It is all of those things combined into one piece. So it is one of the most complex projects that we've ever taken on. We have our software engineers up in Portland combined with our electronic engineers in Phoenix and our power supply guys. And then our design engineers down in Miramar, Florida. They all had to come together and agree on everything to bring VXi to life.
So you got the DSP guys, you got the amplifier guys, you got the mechanical design, you got the industrial design guys, and of course you got Lucio, right? And of course all the software and then the firmware that goes with that, the packaging from marketing, and all of that stuff all came together. And with all the different apps that we had, oh my God, yeah, without a doubt, that one of the most complicated projects ever.
It's hard for us three to agree on everything, let alone that many people in those many departments to come to an agreement on everything.
Get it?
And it really, like we said, it involved more teams than any other product before. And it was possibly one of our best kept secrets before the launch of it, at least so far, right? So when we take when we take a look at the past history of our launches at JL Audio, a lot of times we get really, really excited about the products and the stuff that we're bringing to market. We just want to talk about it and get everybody excited about it. And then we say, well, it's going to come out in a year. And so we really wanted to make sure that when we got the hype out and we got everybody excited, that the product was there and ready to go, which is very, very important. And it was a great, great launch. So stepping over into the hardware and the aspects of it, it is a beautiful amplifier. When you take a look at the design of the amplifier itself, it is an extremely good looking piece. The amplifier, every single section of this amplifier has been looked at and picked not only to look good, but also have some functionality in it too. When you take a look at the casing on it, it is very, very solid, which helps dissipate heat, helps keep radiated noises inside the amplifier. So, but it also looks very, very good. Even the underside of the amplifier, when we're looking at this picture, kind of where the screw holes, the mounting screws go, you can see that they're rounded up. They could have easily been just a squared off corner, but no, we made sure that we touched every single edge of this amplifier, and it just has a great, great look to it and a great, great feel to the amplifier too.
You know, the feel aspect is interesting because I see so many of these like unboxing videos and everyone does, all you can do is see it. And I know that a while ago, maybe not as recent as it should have been, but I was looking at a competitive product and it looked really, really nice. And all the images that I saw online, and I saw one at a shop and I grabbed it and it was really cheap. it felt really, really cheap because yeah, it looked really nice. It had, shiny this and shiny that, but when you grabbed it, the parts that you expected to be beefy and meaty, they weren't. They didn't have that real feel to it. And it's a shame of doing these images. And Kevin, I agree with everything you said. I think it's a gorgeous amplifier, but when you actually hold it, if you haven't you've done that yet, if you haven't held it, when you touch and feel it, you'll realize exactly what Kevin's talking about. This thing is no joke. It's solid. It's incredibly well built, and dead sexy is the term that I like to use. Somebody else, Jeff, used sexy AF. Not sure what AF means, but I'll let you use your imagination. So.
I love that. Even the back plate that you don't see is ribbed and has nice detail to it. I mean, a lot of thought. There we go.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Looking ahead to see if we had a picture of the bottom to jump to it, but we don't have one in here.
Now, I held this one up. If you guys can see my camera, you can take a look at the bottom edge there. I'm not sure if you guys can see the camera or not there, but you can take a look. The bottom edge is very, very clean and even detailed down there too. So let's talk a little bit about the connections to the amplifier. Now, me being an installer, I really, really appreciate these connections. An amplifier having a small chassis is only as good as the real estate that you need to install it. So the nice thing about all of the connections on here is they are all mating connectors that really help you get into tight spots and make them all go in and fit properly. And it keeps all of the dimensions of the amplifier compact, but it also keeps that area that you need to go through and connect everything really compact too. Because if you think about it, if you have to go in there and tie up your or put your power wire into the amplifier and screw it down and do all of that stuff, you need all of that extra space, which is nice with this piece. You do all of that stuff, you have the amplifier maybe mounted underneath the seat, then you can just reach in and push those plugs in. So again, it keeps it nice and tight and compact.
It's interesting about that is you said the word compact a couple of times, and if you focus on that just for a moment, to get all of the different connections that we have on this amplifier to fit on one side is a challenge. So some of the design obstacles that we had to overcome are shown in this image here, and Kevin's going to get into the panel itself and kind of show all the connections on it. But we know that installers like when all the connections are on one side of the amplifier. It's a lot easier for integrating it into an installation. We get that, and when you make this thing as small as possible so that we can fit it under seats or behind the seat or under a box or something in a vehicle, when you start piling on obstacles, you have to kind of look at it and say, how the hell are we going to make all this stuff fit? And what you see here is our approach to how to do that. And Kevin's got some little tips for you in just a moment on some of the tricks you could do to make this even easier. So go. Sorry.
That's all right. So we're going to start off with the power connector with this. The power connectors on these are very nice, and they plug in or they push in very, very firmly too. And one of the nice things to me about the power connectors is, again, doing lots of installs and stuff like that. A lot of times you see power connectors where the screw just screws down and presses into the wire. Well, these are a full clamp down connector on there. So you get a really, really nice tight fit with the wires in there. You don't have to worry about just the surface area of the screw head going in and holding the wire in. It is a complete tooled piece that clamps down on the wire itself, and it makes it nice and easy. Even the remote turn-on wire has that same clamp down style on it. So a lot of thought has been put into these connectors and makes them very, very nice to use on the installation side of things.
Our next that power plug that I think is important, again, it goes to the design aspect. Kevin was talking about it's compact, it's solid, but when you hold it and shake it, you hear it's kind of clanking. And when you look in where the plug actually plugs into the amplifier, those metal sleeves, they kind of on the other side, Kevin. There you go. Those kind of move around in there. They're not glove tight. And there's actually a reason for that. I actually had a dealer ask me, well, why does this feel so cheap? It's making a bunch of noises when I shake it. But that extra play in there allows you to properly seat the plug on the terminals when you plug it in. If that was super tight And then if the plug wasn't properly aligned, we could break something on the amplifier. So that little extra play is there to make sure the plug properly goes on, and then that thing's rock solid. So just again, the design aspects of our team and understanding, the installation aspect and making sure it's reliable and goes on properly.
That's a good point, Rob. Thank you. So we're going to step over to the JLID COM port. Now this is a standard Cat5e port, and it really offers powerful networking capabilities and a single point of control for multiple amplifiers in the system by using a VXi hub. And we'll get into that and all of the networking here in a second. You can also plug in the VXi BTC into the COM port for easy wireless control with the Tune software. So let's talk about some of these optional accessories right now. The first one we're going to get into is the VXi hub, and like I said, this is an optional accessory, and it allows you to connect up to 6 amplifiers and control those 6 amplifiers with a single point of control. And what I mean by that is you can have one DRC to be able to go through and change presets through all 6 amplifiers. You can have one DRC to go and control the master volume and subwoofer volume control through all 6 of those amplifiers there, and do all of the communication back and forth. You can also have the ability to plug in your computer into the master amplifier and be able to see all of the networks on the all of the amplifiers on the network, and be able to go through and do all of the tuning and go through and select those amplifiers and all of that. So it makes it really nice when you're dealing with a lot of different amplifiers in the system. You'll see some buttons on there. They're amp identifiers. You can press them and it'll actually highlight the amplifier's badge light will start to flash for you to let you know which one you're working with. And it also has an optical router on the other side of it too. So if you need to split off your optical signal, you actually have 5 outputs on there and 1 input to be able to get your optical router or your optical signal routed to all of the multiple amplifiers on there too. A lot of times this piece is actually installed because it makes life a little easier rather than it being a necessity. Realistically, for it to be a necessity, you have to have multiple full range amplifiers in the system with preset capabilities needed to go through and switch presets on there. So keep that in mind. If you're just doing like an 808 and a 1001, you don't necessarily need to have this, but you might want to use it for the optical routing, or maybe it just makes it a nice easy point of control for the system in there too. So a lot of times you'll see these installed because it makes life a little easier rather than it just being a necessity.
One thing to also know, that router, guys, is separate from the communication ports. So output 1 is not necessarily tied to COM port 1 on the hub. It's really just, it's a router. It's really 2 separate things in a convenient single chassis. So just be aware of that when you're using those, because that question does come up.
And the nice thing, I had to use one in my one vehicle because the length of the run was too long for the optical. So I actually simply used mine as an optical router to get the distance for my amplifiers in the system because I ran out of length on my... A little bit, right? But there's a spec there, and that spec, if you want to meet it, it's not a very long spec, so keep that in mind. Now, you can use 2 of these. What's that, Steve?
It's like ringing a doorbell with a cannon. You get the job done, but it's a little more than you need.
It all works in the end, right? So you can use 2 of these in conjunction with one another to have up to 10 amplifiers in the system. And if any of you guys are using 2 of these and having 10 amplifiers in the system, please send it over to me. I'd be really interested to check that system out. I could just think of 9 or maybe 6 808s and 4 1001s in the system. That'd be a pretty cool system. I'd want to see that one for sure.
Without a doubt.
So stepping over into the BTC, this is also an optional accessory, and this is a Bluetooth controller, not a streamer. So keep that in mind there. It is for connecting Tune Express and Tune Mobile to the VXi amplifiers wirelessly. So you can see this little guy here. And when you take a look at these accessories, they look very, very much, they have, or I should say, they have the same industrial look as the amplifiers themselves. So they go really hand in hand with one of them. You know, normally say if you're installing an amplifier into the system, you don't necessarily need to leave this in the system. And if you are a shop owner, I would definitely have one of these in stock tied to a concrete block in the back, kind of like the bathroom key is, so that way it doesn't get legs and walks off, because they are pretty tiny pieces there. And it does make it very, very nice. What's that?
It's very easy to fall between seats. So the hall pass or bathroom key approach is definitely a good one.
It is very, very easy to fall between the seats there. And it helps connect, like I said, with Tune Express and Tune Mobile. You can use your Apple iPhones, iPads, your Android smartphones, and your Android tablets there, excuse me, with Tune Express or Tune Mobile. Now moving on to the JLID control port. This is added in for wired remote controls like the DRC 200 or 205. We're going to kind of focus on the 205. The 200, probably most of you guys are familiar with it. If you aren't, it's the one that has the LED that beacons like a satellite there. So they have a really, really bright LED on them. It is
on the space station complain about it.
So the 205 did fix that, and it also has a really, really nice, classy, high-end feel to it, too. It is a dual concentric knob, so you can see at the photo there, you have your inner and your outer concentric knobs, and it does provide both preset selection and various modes of output control. Most of the times you're going to use this for a subwoofer control and maybe a master volume control, but you can go into Tune software and be able to change those to a few different options there for like a fader or a zone control or anything like that. So you do have some options to change that up a bit. Now it does have an integrated LED. It's not a separate LED like the 200 was. And the nice thing is it has a really nice halo glow to it. It's not just an LED that is shining up there. So it's a real nice clean look to that piece on there. So going back to the front panel here, our next connection point I want to talk about is the analog input connector. And this is kind of one that Steve was hinting to a little bit ago, and some things that we can do with this piece. So we get a lot of questions on the analog input connector and kind of why did you guys use this on there? Well, one of the nice things is that if we had an 808 and put all of the innies and outies on the front of that 808, the chassis size would probably almost double the length of the amplifier as it is now, because they just take up a lot of real estate. So we wanted to use a connector, and that connector had to be noise-free and had to be reliable, and it had to be able to secure very well. So when we take a look at different connectors, we actually didn't reinvent the wheel on this. Our engineers did some thinking on this guy, and we went with that type of connector. And the reason why is when you take a look at your printing, well, it has to be noise-free. If it wasn't noise-free, you'd get lines everywhere on your printouts and all of that good stuff. And it had to be durable. I don't know in my lifetime if I've ever seen one of these break, and it had to be a really good secure connection. Anytime I've tried to remove these off of a printer that's been sitting for a couple months, I had to go and get pliers and a screwdriver and all of that stuff to be able to get it off, even if I just hand tightened it on, because they are just a very good, secure, noise-free connection on them. So it fit all of the check boxes that we needed to have there, and it was a connector that was already readily available, so that's why we went with this route. Now, the nice thing is if you are using the optical inputs and the optical outputs, and you don't need to have an external trigger, 12-volt trigger coming out of the amplifier, and you don't use the valet on there, you actually don't need to use this connector. And in my Ford Super Duty, I actually did an integration piece that had optical out on it, and I went optical into my amplifier, into my VXi, and then optical out into my other VXi amplifier, and I did not use these analog cables. So you can not have to use them if you don't want to, or if you are using an analog input, you will have to use these. So just keep that in mind. You have the options to go ahead and do that if you want to, and if your OEM integration piece allows for that or doesn't allow for that.
That's an excellent point, Kevin. It really does give insight into some of the design choices that we've been referring to. Obviously, we knew the dimensions we wanted to be as compact as possible, but the innies and the outies, as you call them, that does create a big problem of how we're going to get them all to fit on there. So through, we'll call them discussions that we had with engineers, it came down to, well, the prevalence of people using a digital audio signal is going to grow and grow, and we have a digital input, so you might not even need this thing. And everything is said about the harness, you know, lots of pins in a compact area that's noise-free and reliable. Absolutely nailed that. Nice and compact, does a great job. And if you don't like it, just send an optical signal in there, get rid of it, and not even worry about it. So a lot of these things did come up in the conversations, and we made choices based on all of that information. Instead of just saying we have to do this one thing, no, there's lots of different ways of doing this. And this was, I thought, a very elegant way to address that and give, I'll call it the outlet valve, the digital signal in, to not have to use it if someone doesn't like it.
And the coatings that are on all of these connectors is just a very, very high end, just a really nice, nice feel to them, and look really good too. So done a great
just
job
at a glance, and I think this might be beneficial. Sorry to interrupt, but Jeff brought up some interesting things. First thing he asked was if there's audio delay running the optical cable from one amp to the next. Yeah, effectively there would be. Anytime you're running a signal that goes through a DA or AD or whatever the conversion is, there's going to be some kind of a delay. However, if you're tuning your system, you can tune that delay out very easily. I have it written down somewhere. I know the delay of one of the amplifiers if you wanted to know that, but if you're measuring for all that stuff, you can measure that out. And the next question that he asked is related to that. He's got an 808 and then two 601s, and he wants to know if he could daisy chain. The answer is yes. You can send signal analog or digital signal into the 800, then you could use the optical out to go into the first base amplifier and then route it out from that amplifier to the second one. And each one will have a slight delay, and you can just offset that in a tuning process. Outside the scope of today's conversation, but definitely get in touch with our tech department or any one of us, and we could guide you through that offset as needed.
And if you don't want to worry about the offset, you could use the cannonball and install the optical the hub with the optical router, and then that would alleviate all of your delays that you would have on there too. So you do have that option to be able to go that route also. So all of the VXi amplifiers, we use differential balanced inputs that do a phenomenal job at rejecting noise and can accept up to 16 volts of signal input on them. That's a ton. And that's really, really useful when you're integrating this into maybe a higher power OEM system that doesn't require a DSP to correct the signal out of it. Because this doesn't have that OEM integration correction capabilities on it. So your analog RCA outputs do have up to 4 volts of signal to be able to go to another amplifier. And all of the VXi amplifiers have digital inputs and digital outputs, which we'll show you here in a second. And the nice thing is you can go in analog into one of the VXi amplifiers and go out optical, or you can go out in optical and out analog. You can mix all of that signal routing within the software, and it makes it really, really simple to really customize the system to whatever the needs are. So getting back into the front panel here, with our VXi Connections, we have our SD card and our reset button on there. The SD card slot is on there for maybe some future enhancements. Right now it does not do anything at this point in time, but it is on there in case we want to do some future enhancements to the amplifier. The reset button is there just in case you need to reset the amplifier. Sometimes older software versions may require a reset after the amplifier has been updated. However, most of the newer versions of software do not require this update to, or this the the amplifier to be reset when you update it. So if you have one of the very, very early versions of this and you plug it into Tune and you update the software, it may ask you to reset the amplifier when it's done. That's where you would go in and hit your reset button. Any of the newer versions on there you should be okay with. It'll just go ahead and update them, and it may or may not require you to reset the amplifier at that point in time.
Just real quick on that, it's actually firmware that might need to be updated on the amplifier.
Yes.
And it's incredibly rare. That what Kevin was referring to, some of the early amplifiers that went out, as we've made improvements, we've increased some of the functionality of the amplifier, as well as we added our marine version of this, the MVI, which didn't exist when we originally did the firmware. So we had to expand that firmware. Sometimes that firmware does require the amplifier to be reset to kind of reflash it. But sometimes the firmware update doesn't need that. All of that is managed within the Tune software, so you don't have to really think about that. Most of the time, what we use the reset button for is, as Kevin mentioned, if there is a need for that, for the firmware update, or if there's an issue with the amplifier that you just need to like kind of give it a kick in the butt, so to speak, and that's a troubleshooting procedure. So the tech guys in our technical support department, they would guide you towards hitting the reset button in a specific way to get that amp back up and running. It's rare, but over the past couple of years or however long we've been offering the VXi amplifiers, I've only seen one or two of them, and actually the reset did not bring it back to life or something like that. There may have been others, I'm just not aware of them, but it's a nice little safety net to have on a product that has a DSP in it.
Yeah, essentially, you have two buttons there. You have a reboot, which essentially is just like resetting your computer. It reboots it. And then you have the reset, which is essentially doing a factory reset where you're going to completely wipe the amp out and start in a, as new, like new condition.
Thanks, guys. Moving over to the USB, it is a standard newer style printer, USB A to B cable. Each VXi amplifier comes with a 6-foot cable included. So if you do a lot of these, you'll have a lot of those cables floating around for you. And unless you're like me that has a standard cab pickup truck, the 6-foot cable probably is not going to be enough for being able to sit in a listening position or sit outside the vehicle when you have a microphone there and do tuning. So we do offer a larger one, and the nice thing about the one that we do offer, it is a heavier gauge cable, so we're able to get some longer length out of that. One of the things I've seen people do is they'll actually sell that into the system, and they'll hide that cable up in the kick panel or up underneath the dashboard somewhere. So that way, if they need to tap in or if they want to go in and do some fine tuning to the customer's vehicle down the line, they have that point of connection already there, and it's nice and simple and easy to get to. So again, it just depends on how you want to set up the system and what the customer wants. But we do offer that longer one, so that way you can get in there and run that in most vehicles without any problems. And then our Toslink inputs and outputs that we talked about earlier, that is where they are at. So you would go ahead and plug your digital input and your digital outputs to your secondary amplifiers right into those spots there. And of course, last but not least is our speaker harness output. And one of the things I like about this, and again, it comes from installing these quite a bit, is actually the clip on the plug is on the bottom side of that. I don't know how many times I've had other devices, whether it's amplifiers or processors or anything like that, and the clips are up, and I go to reach underneath a seat or underneath an amp rack or in a tight space, and that clip starts snagging or gets caught on my shirt or scratching up my arm. It's like the old zip ties when people cut them with the angle cutters there. So this one actually goes face down and faces towards where the mounting area is going to be, so you don't have that sharp edge or that rough edge to go in there and snag on. So again, just thinking about all of the little things and the little nuances with installing these amplifiers, and that's just one more of them that really makes them special with the amplifiers. And it is a really simple, easy plug to be able to just grab, push in, and pull out. So really nice and simple with a nice secure latch on there.
As a side note, the color codes on the multi-channel amplifiers, they tend to follow a standard convention for wiring in cars. up until we run out of those colors, and then we just made some up. But that's kind of neat. And inside the Tune software, the interface that you'll set things up, the output colors match the wires that are on the plug. So all throughout the interface and throughout the physical amplifier itself, everything will track and line up. Kind of neat.
Yeah, that is very nice on there. So now that we've got the front panel and the layout down, let's look into some of the technologies that make up VXi. The first one I want to talk about is NextD2, and it's really a great improvement on NextD, which is already a great Class D technology. We're using new, smaller, more efficient power supply and output devices that's going to give you a quieter, more reliable, and just better overall audio performance from the amplifier. But those smaller sizes also allowed our engineers to do an even better job with the layout of the circuit board. We really minimized the lengths of the ground return pass and the interactions between the different channels on there, giving better separation, reducing distortion, and radiated noise on the amplifier too. And real quick, I have to say, the board layout on this, I know you guys made some comments about the external portion of this amplifier, but when you take a look at the board layout of it, the most politically correct thing I can say is it is dead sexy.
With you. I think the outside looks great, but being a geek looking on the inside, it's just too awesome. That's why I'm like leaning in, I'm staring at it.
It is just a good looking board layout on there.
It really is. Yeah, that minimum loop thing that you described is a really big deal. If some amplifiers, you get crosstalk between the different channels, and it's because there's only so much room on a board that you can actually put things, because parts have a physical size to them. But these new devices that we have access to, and you could see some in there if you look really carefully, that gives us a lot more leeway of where we can put things and really minimize a lot of that crosstalk issue that can happen. So it's in addition to, like Kevin said, making it sound better, being quieter and more efficient, it also allows us to be more creative and do a better job with board layout. It's cool. And just for the record, we do all of that in-house, every bit of it, board layout, all of it, 100% internal.
So one last thing I want to talk about is the implement of advanced rollback protection that VXi has. I don't know if you've ever had an amplifier that you've been cruising down the road, really jamming on for a long duration period of time that has shut down on you. Well, with the new with the implementation of the advanced rollback protection, what it does is when the amplifier reaches that unsafe operating temperature, it maintains the gain of the amplifier while just rolling back the peaks or the peak power there until the amplifier cools down to a safe operating temperature. And it's cool because most cases, this is an audible protection to the listener. So you won't be able to hear this in almost all cases. It's just rolling down those peak power on there, and like I said, it maintains the gain of the amplifier, so you're probably not going to notice it unless you happen to be able to see the LED designation for that protection circuit on there. So it's a really cool design. It's going to keep you the ability to keep listening on it and keep railing on it without having it cut off on you. So now that we've gone through some of the technologies, let's roll into the DSP itself. We use AKM, and it is, if you're not familiar with AKM, it is one of the premier DSP chip and DAC manufacturers in the world. And they actually collaborated with our engineering team. So this wasn't just a firmware and a piece that they took and put into these amplifiers. They actually collaborated with our engineering teams to customize that firmware of the DSP chip and use specifically in our VXi amplifiers. And it's a very powerful DSP that can do a lot. And when we take a look at what it can do, we have our high resolution processing, and that's really only the start of the complete DSP features on it. Every single output channel, including the analog pre-outs, has the DSP, or the benefits of DSP. So if you take a look at the pre-outs on this, you can give existing non-DSP amplifiers that might already be in the system, you can give them DSP processing capabilities. And every single channel on there will have your 10-band parametric or graphic EQ if you're old school and like to use the graphics on there. Hopefully we'll sway you into using parametrics because they are way better to use and a lot more simple. High pass, low pass filter options for both Butterworth and Linkwitz Riley filters. You have multiple different options to be able to go in and select. Delay up to 0.01 millisecond steps. And these do have the all elusive all pass filter options to be able to go in there and select your all pass filters if you understand or if you want to go in there and mess with them. Now, output level.
If you want to learn how an all pass filter works, the rest of this course gets into some of the techie aspects of that. And then when we get to the culmination, the 301 course, that's when we actually talk about what an all-pass filter can really do. So hang in there if you're interested. And if you don't have the patience for all of them, the video should be available online soon.
And the output level trim is the last thing I just want to talk. And this is extremely helpful. And do not confuse this with input sensitivity or input sensitivity levels on there. You'll go in, you'll set your input sensitivity level with the clipping indicators on the input side of things, but then you also have an output level, so you can go in and level match the speakers in the system without having to change that input sensitivity like you would do on a non-DSP amplifier. So, some of the benefits of our integrated DSP on here. One of the biggest benefits of it in having the AKM engineering team working together with our engineering team is the fact that the AKM DSP chip also manages the entirety of the amplifier, like a master clock. And having that master clock managing the amplifier is extremely, extremely beneficial. When we take a look at all of these switching devices that have extremely tight tolerances, inside, those tolerances may be really, really tight. However, they may have some variances from one another. So that master clock will go in and keep all of these in sync and keep the amplifier devices running in harmony. You missed that one, Steve, huh?
I did. Haha.
Going back real quick, Kevin, from a sales aspect, one of the benefits of that internal DSP is it's one less thing to talk about. One less feature a lot of customers may not understand why they would want or need, or let's be real, maybe intimidating for salesmen or installers to discuss the benefits. So the fact that it's built into VXi, that is one less thing you have to try to sell to a customer. Instead, a good demo will sell that DSP for you, since it's built into the amplifier, and I love that aspect about it.
Don't sell the features of it, sell the experience, right? I got that from a smart sales guy. So another huge benefit of the DSP is having the ability to create presets. And when we take a look at just some of the presets that you can go in through and do, driver optimized tune, passenger optimized tune, multi-seat tune capabilities on there. I'm kind of selfish, so I keep to the driver optimized tune. However, in my vehicle, when I go to my driver optimized tune, I actually have it shutting off the rear speakers in the vehicle. So then also if the kids are back there sleeping or relaxing or on their phones doing something else, they don't have to listen to the music that's going on in the back there too. So you can have that preset to be able to shut those off. And different input and sources is very important. What we mean by that is, so you have your OEM integration piece or your aftermarket receiver coming into the amplifier. And maybe you want to also integrate into like a portable high resolution player. Well, you can go through and do that and have each preset select the different inputs in the input mixer there, in the input router. So you can go ahead and have multiple inputs and have presets to be able to select between those different multiple inputs on the amplifier, which make it really, really nice. A lot of these high resolution portable players are becoming more and more popular. So now you can go ahead and integrate that for the customer without any issues and just have a preset to be able to to go through and add that in. And then you just got to tell them that the blue preset is for your high-res player, the red preset is for your OEM integration or your aftermarket receiver there. So the most important benefit of DSP is the simplicity of it. And I know many of us have an idea that DSP is complicated, and I believe it's just misunderstood. Once most of us learned how to use our smartphones, think about that. Very few of us went back to flip phones at that point in time. And it's just an analogy I like to use. Same with when we talk about if you are a retailer and you did alarm systems and you had to go in and solder all those wires back in the day and relays and all of that stuff. Now you got a nice quite little module that you just program with the computer and you throw it in the vehicle and you are done. So probably very few of us would go back to the old way of doing that. So once you learned how to do the programming and learned how to do the operating system, whether it's on your smartphone or whether it's on your DSP or your alarm systems on there, it's very, very hard to go back to those old ways on there. So like I said, it's not complicated. It's just misunderstood. And once you get to using it, it'll be more and more comfortable for you going through forward. So this is a common standalone DSP system. Lots of boxes, lots of cables to manage. It could be even worse if you have an OEM integration device that you have in the mix there too, that may have some settings on it too. When we take a look at this, if that OEM integration device had some settings on the output, you'd have to go through and set those. You'd have to set the input sensitivity of your standalone DSP, set the output level trim of your standalone DSP, then go through and set all of the input sensitivities on your amplifiers. That was difficult to say, let alone go through and do. So when we take a look at this and being able to simplify this down, we can get away from a lot of these connections and a lot of these settings by just going through and having that integrated DSP. So we take a look at all of these connections, and each one of these analog connections is a chance of having something with noise, or maybe having a bad RCA or a bad connection somewhere, or even just getting left and right mixed up sometimes. So there's a lot going on there. So let's take it and simplify that. And let's take our source unit or our OEM integration device and go directly into our DSP amplifier, minimizing all of those cables, all of those input and output settings. Now we have one device that we're going to go ahead and plug into and make all of our changes from that. And the nice thing about this is we do have DSP out on those analog inputs like we discussed earlier. So if you have an amplifier, your customer has an amplifier that is in the system already for their subwoofer, you could go ahead and add DSP to that just by plugging it in to the analog outputs of the VXi amplifiers, which is really, really nice. You're updating their current system by adding a VXi into that. So really, really helpful. An even simpler approach is, Steve and I talked a little bit about using the Toslink or the optical cables earlier. And we can take this one step further. It's really, really hard to get left and right wrong with optical cables on there. And also you do minimize the need for setting your input sensitivity because it is a standard across the board. It's not a signal. It's not an analog signal coming into the amplifier that fluctuates. It's all digital, so that information is all done through that digital realm. So it makes it nice and easy. It's one cable, not multiple RCAs. It does not have the ability to induce noise into the system because it is not a leveled signal going through a cable. And it does not need to have your input sensitivity set up on there because it is a standard. So it makes it nice and simple and cleans everything up. And like we said, you can go optical out, or if the customer has an amplifier in there that doesn't support optical, you can go analog out to that secondary amplifier without any issues too. And it just makes it very, very simple to be able to go through and run those.
Real quick, a comment on those optical cables. Optical is pretty much optical. I know there are some things that you can look at in terms of specs, But by and large, when you're dealing with a car audio system, obviously you want some reliability to it. The glass fiber optical cables, they do run the risk of breaking in a car, so we don't really recommend those, which keeps you with the plastic domain. And it's saying the word sounds wrong, but it's actually the right thing to do. It's far more durable and far more reliable. It doesn't have quite the length of signal in terms of being able to transmit as much as glass, but that's where you can use Kevin's trick of using the hub as an extender on that. But don't get hung up on any of those specs for this application. It's really not that vital. Just a good quality connector. Yes, we do offer some. It has a little JL logo on that, and we like to kid around. It says that gives you 3 dB more output. It doesn't. It's light. It's all about the same. So long as the connection is nice and solid, which they all should be, you should be fine. You know, the early testing that we did, we used those basic little cables, and we're trying to play around with the angle that you could actually bend them. We found some you could loop around a couple of fingers and get them really tight. And for mobile audio installations, that's really golden. As long as you can get around tight corners without breaking it, you're in good shape.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up, Steve, is stay away from the glass ones because you are going to have some tight corners that you have to make, or maybe some people getting in and out of the vehicle that may end up stepping on the cable if it's underneath the carpet or something like that. So stick with the plastic ones. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and you'll be good to go.
I love that online that they sell gold-plated Toslink cables for like $150, which is the stupidest thing because it has nothing to do with the actual connection for the flow of signal.
Saying something in his money is soon parted. I forget the quote, but I think you know what I'm referring to.
Alrighty, so when we go through and we talk about the simplicity really doesn't end there with being able to have your connections in the amplifier and the install being simplified with there. Tune software really helps streamline that workflow when you're doing the tuning or doing the setup of the amplifier. The nice thing about this is if you're doing multiples of the same vehicle, you can actually save those files and be able to reuse those project files for the next vehicle coming in. So if you're doing a lot of F-150s or a lot of Silverados or Dodge Rams, you're able to go ahead and have a base F-150 tune, and then next F-150 that comes in may have some different speakers in it, but you're just going to have to go in there and make some minor adjustments for the different speakers that you're using in it for that specific system. But think about it. All of your timing, your distances, all your delays going to be pretty much exactly the same because the speaker locations in that specific vehicle are going to be the same. So you're going to have a lot already done. Maybe you use the same OEM integration piece, so that signal routing, all of that stuff's already going to be handled for you. And it's just going to help you streamline the workflow with the software. Make sure you back these files up to a cloud storage just in case somebody dumps a bottle of water on a laptop. Not saying that I've ever done that before, but it's but make sure you're using cloud-based storage, or maybe multiple locations that you're saving those files on there. Use the setup tool. It really is going to save you time on there. Don't just hit cancel when it comes up. Go through and set it up. Put notes in the fields. And again, we go through this in some of the later classes that you can go through and see with the Tune software. I believe that is 106, I believe, is the software. And you can go ahead and take a look at that one, or join us later date for that, which will really walk you through all of that. Save, and like we said, store those projects on there. If you are doing wireless, it's nice because you are able to wirelessly move around on your iPad and have pretty much the same functionality as if you are plugged in. It's a little bit different layout, but functionality is very similar. And Tune Express is nice because it goes ahead and lets you do a quick tune in the system, and it looks exactly like an XD amplifier. So it's a very familiar interface and really allows you to go ahead and walk through and get that system tuned. Especially if you don't have time, or maybe the customer wants to come back and do a full-blown tune later down the road. So you have that ability to go through and do that. So that...
Kevin, you were talking about saving the project files to the cloud as backup. That's also a great avenue. If you have multiple locations, if instead of saving directly to the computer, saving to the cloud where different stores have access to that, it really makes it easy. If you have that go-to F-150 system, RAM system, whatever the case may be, with multiple stores, that means there's multiple computers or tablets. Everyone has access to those same files. And I think that's really cool as well and further streamlines the efficiency, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So any questions? I'm going to actually log out of here. And
awesome, Kevin. Thanks for covering all of that. We'll see if anyone has some additional questions. I think we answered most of Jeff's questions as they came up. But if there's any other dialogue or conversation that you guys want to have, now is the time.
now would be the time.
VXi has been exciting as a company. You know, just the whole concept of it actually came from the tech department. You know, we were talking about, you know, obviously tech is one of, I call them one of the front lines. So communication, both with our customers as well as our retail partners and distributors, questions and comments will almost always channel in through them as a first point of contact. So they get to hear a lot of the complaints or concerns or confusions that may exist on any of the product. And I remember Jeff Schoon, our senior VP of, or executive VP, I forget what his title is now, but kind of heads up our Phoenix office and kind of oversees all of this. He was in Florida, and we were talking about some of the new ideas that we were, you know, this is going back a number of years. And he says, why don't you find out what the guys in tech would want? Absolutely. So I went, I got the guys together, and we started talking about some ideas. And I think it was Mike. I think Mike is on, you know, well, if we're thinking about doing DSP, why do we need any controls on the amp at all? I said, well, yeah, you need input sensitivity. Why? And he kept asking why. It's like, you know what? I don't have a good answer for you. There's so many things that are not so good about having potentiometers and dials and switches, mechanical, physical things. They can go bad over time. That's a bad thing. And most of the failures that we saw over the years of selling amplifiers, it almost always came down to a mechanical issue, not an electrical issue. Tell right there. So it's pretty rock solid from an electrical point of view. It's the mechanics, the potentiometers, the little dials and the switches that tend to go bad. So if we got rid of all of those, we have a more reliable product. And with that, we could actually take the money from that and drop it back into better componentry, everything that Kevin just described. So it really, the product was born from conversations within our technical department, which gets their information from all of you. So I think it's a great little backstory on the product.
I remember those conversations, and I remember Mike just sitting back. Well, why? Well, why? Why?
It's like a 4-year-old, you know, he just keeps asking the question, and it gets you so annoyed, especially because you don't have answers. You know, it's like there's no reason. I can't tell you why. So why don't we do that? Okay, we'll do it.
The other thing with that is when we take a look at the consistency of an install, you're not just turning a filter knob to a point, and I know those dials are pretty good and get you kind of really close on there, but you're a lot closer when you can go ahead and type in the exact number and the exact filter slope and everything else to be consistent through vehicles down the road. I mean, how many times you remember, wait a minute, I turned that knob to just past 80 hertz, or you remember, oh, this is, let me look up his tune file, I wrote it in here, and I can go ahead and set this to 85 hertz or whatever, you know, 24 dB a filter. So it's nice because you can be a lot more consistent with it. The other big thing for me is presets, and talking to a few retailers really kind of opened my eyes, and what they've done with presets is they've gone through and they've set up systems to where you have a two-way C7 set up, and then you have the ability to select a preset to bring the mid-range driver in there, and it changes all of your filter points to be able to demonstrate the full three-way setup of the C7. And maybe they have a preset that has rears on it and maybe no rears in it and all of that. So it's a great, great tool to be able to demonstrate different systems in one given vehicle and really allow somebody to really experience and have a good listening experience.
It's a really good point. So it's something funny when you're talking about the potentiometers and, what position did you turn it to? This is a very old problem that we've been dealing with as an industry, an audio industry that is, for a really, really long time. I'm sure there's other ones. And we solved it as a group, not just JL Audio, by having detented potentiometers that would click, right? So as you turn it, you could count the clicks. And then, I know we provided a chart that would show you if it's, 12 clicks, that's 82.5 hertz. And that was our attempt to try to get some detail and resolution to something that's otherwise just a guessing game, right? So, that was our early attempt. So this became a logical thing. Now, not only can we get really, really accurate, but we could be dead on, very, very accurate with those settings. And like I said, you could type in the exact value and then it's copy paste. It's not count again. It's copy paste. Literally, it's a computer file at that point. It's a lot easier.
If you're using the same source unit on these repeatable systems, you don't even have to reset input sensitivity once it's done right the first time. Yeah. As long as that input voltage is the same, you don't even have to touch it.
Absolutely. Jeff did ask a question in the chat. He asked about any new models coming out. Well, here's the thing. We got the mono amplifiers covered, the big boy and the not so big boy, right? We have 2, 4, 6, and 8 channel. We have the system amplifiers. What would you want? I mean, seriously, what would you want? I know what I want. There's a model that I want. Let's see what you guys come up with. So more power. Of course he wants more power.
Well, Jeff, a very popular system is actually using an 808, and I've done this in multiple vehicles, is using an 808 as an amplifier just for a three-way setup. So your tweeters running off the front, your tweeters and mid-range running off the front 4 channels, and then bridging the rear 4 channels on there, the backside of the amplifier, to be a 2-channel amplifier to basically double the power to your mid-bass drivers. And really give them a good output, and they really get in there when you do that.
That's I do the same thing in the Jeep. I got the 8-channel amplifier running in 6-channel mode. So Jeff is acknowledging that the 808 setup that we are describing is a really popular one. No surprise. We do have the 600/2.
Yeah.
Pause. So people say the what? That one's not selling all that well, but that is a very powerful option if you're looking for something to drive 2 dedicated drivers. That's a very, very powerful option if you wanted to do that. Like the 808 myself, what I would want, personally, if it was just Steve saying, oh, okay, let's go ahead and do this, it would be an amplifier with more channels. So I know 8 channels is a lot, but if you're trying to take advantage of an existing OEM system and you want to keep any upmixing capability that it might have, having something with additional channels, I think would be really nice, like a 10 or a 12 channel amplifier, or maybe like a 11 channel amplifier, have a nice big sub output if you wanted to. Something big, something honking, something with lots of channels. That's what I would want. And again, as is the nature of the VXi product line, whatever the number of channels is, you have that number of channels of DSP plus 2, the 2 being the preamp output. So let's say the 808, you have 8 channels of powered DSP outputs, and you have 2 channels of non-powered DSP outputs, which is a really neat way of building systems. So literally, you buy as much DSP and amplifier power as you actually know, amplifier channels as you need. So that's something to keep in mind.
The thing I see the most is, more powerful mono blocks, but I've always kind of found, a customer looking for 1500 watts probably isn't a DSP type customer a lot of the time. So if you do want to still do some sort of DSP, and you need that kind of power, we're taking advantage of those pre-outs with the DSP processing comes in. So, that's where that flexible aspect, you can bless a regular amp with the, intelligence of VXi through those pre-outs. And if you have multiple,
that everybody's a DSP customer, they just don't know it yet.
That's the truth, right?
A lot of us think that DSP is all about, high-end system tuning. Yes, you could do that. But DSP is a more reliable, more repeatable, faster, and easier way of getting good performance, regardless of what you do with it. So even if you never turn on the EQ, the filters are better, they're more versatile, you have more options on it. Right there alone, there is no analog circuitry that's going to get in the way of the signal. Once it's in the digital domain, everything stays digital as you process it. These are all great things. Now, I get your point, Rob, that if they're listening to like really crazy music and they're really not that discerning, they may not, see an advantage of that. But the detail and accuracy, it goes back to what Kevin started off with. Customers, whether they ask for it or not, they're looking for reliable systems. Very rare customers can say, I'm looking to make the system more reliable. It's sort of implied. They don't want it to break. Well, if you have the repeatability and the accuracy and the digital aspect that we talked about, no potentiometers, that does check that box for that customer, even though they didn't specifically ask for it. But further to Rob's point, if they're just trying to amp up on the subwoofer and do crazy things, the DSP functionality is not as critical for that. But the ability to take the DSP functionality from a bass amplifier and put it onto the other amplifier, hey, that's a home run. Getting something they could take advantage of and getting something that they need. So I like it. And Jeff's commenting that the DSP on a sub can actually help out. That's a DSP tuning trick for sure. But yeah, there's some things you can do there for certain. Peter Hewitt over in the UK is doing an 808 install at the moment. Some 3-way active fronts and sub. Fantastic, Peter. Nice to see you on the chat today.
It's late over there.
It is late over there. Well, Peter's always working, so. We are past the top of the hour. The conversation brought us long, so it's only 10 p.m. Yeah, it's not too bad. I want to thank everyone for not only the comments in the chat and being interactive. That makes our lives a lot more fun and easier. Appreciate that. Appreciate you spending the time with us today on this conversation. We look forward to seeing you all in future ones. We'll chill out here for a little bit longer in case anything else comes up, but if not, thanks again for watching.